Okay, that's the moon. It's a little fuzzy out here, and it's a kind of a cruddy phone, but it's slightly overcast. Well, what the heck is that? That's not the sun, and according to my little planet guide, it's not a planet. What the heck is that? Any help would be appreciated.
You can see the jet now, but he's definitely flying. This is probably the same seeing all over the. It's just floating there. That's what's the weirdest part about it. And you can see the jet stream from all the fighter jets flying around.
The stars are actually angels. They are not big balls of gas and fire like they tell us. And those galaxies are not what they tell us either. I'll prove both to you right now. First off, this is what a star looks like zoomed in on a telescope. What does that look like to you? You know, I don't have to say it. Now let's crack out the Bible real quick. This is from Revelation 1:16. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. The stars are the angels. It says it right there. Now, I believe it's commonly known that when Satan fell from heaven, he took 1/3 of the angels with him. Now this is from Revelation chapter 12. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. It's talking about Satan. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to earth. Why did it say stars and not angels? Because that's what they are. Now you're probably wondering, what are these galaxies and nebulas that they show us? Now this is in Psalm chapter 18. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion around him were the dark waters, which is referring to the waters above the firmament, and thick clouds of the skies. So God's secret place is these thick clouds in the skies that are surrounded by the dark waters, which is the water above the firmament. Now take one of these pictures right here. Turn it to black and white. What do you see? That is a cloud. Here's another one. Cloud. All the NASA images are literally created by artists. They even tell you on the news. Watch this.
Many of those images have a dark, grainy start, but color and light reveal an astonishing glimpse of how the deepest regions of space might appear to the human eye. What I'm trying to do is...
And before you go, NASA means to deceive. Watch this. The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. To beguile means to deceive. In the Hebrew translation, NASA. So NASA means to deceive. Not to mention they got a big old serpent tongue going through the whole logo. What's a serpent? It is a large snake, a sly or treacherous person, especially one who exploits a position of trust in order to betray it. There you have it. Go ahead and hit that like and that follow.
First of all, you have really bad understanding about telescopes. You've been taught by education system that telescope can see billion miles away, and this is wrong. Our firmament is, as much as I know personally, this is not concrete evidence, between 5 and 7,000 miles off. So that's how far our telescopes can see. Let's say, 10,000 miles. That's the maximum, and that's it. If the sun is further away, you can't zoom in with any telescope because we can't see it that far. Simple as that. All these telescopes, like we've been provided with now Hubble, and they never turn around and show the Earth or anything else because it doesn't exist. They're all in Hollywood studios, so NASA studio, Disney studio. It's all deception. You all been brainwashed to believe that there's many satellites flying in space, falling around the Earth and never falls down, which is complete bullshit. But if you want to believe that, you're welcome. I don't have a problem with that. Many people believe that, but I don't. So if you ask me, you know, why it's impossible to see, you can't see sometimes moon because it's traveling next to the sun. So you only see when it comes into your view. Let's say, you know, 3, 4, 5,000 miles away, and then you see, like, you know, when the sun comes towards you, that's when you can see it. And when the sun, before the sunset, you know that firmament moves all the stars around, and the light comes with the firmament. So you see first light, then you see the little bit of the sun, and you see sun rays coming through. That's proving that the sun is local. And the same thing, when people think that the sun is lighting all the blue sky, it's wrong. The sun is not lighting anything. It's just a bright star. The light is from the light side of the firmament. The firmament has a light side and a dark side. And obviously sun plays big part, you know, when it comes closer to the middle in summer, it will lit up firmament above him. If we enclose, that's when it lights up and changes the direction, not direction, it changes the light shape. Okay? Happy thinking.
Thank you for the comment. I'm right there with you. Right there with you. 49 years of my life, by the way. But, good question. Really good question. They'll tell you they use mathematics to measure the distance to a star. But when I ask somebody to pick a tree in their yard, and you tell me how far away it is without using a measuring tool, nobody can seem to do it. And that's like right there. But they expect me to believe that they can do it at 93 million miles? You people have to start to question this. Make it make sense.
Oh my days. So they just found a giant 7-foot sword and mirror for demon slaying. Oh my diddy. Researchers in Japan were excavating an ancient Kofun burial mound where they found an enormous shield-shaped bronze mirror and a giant 7-foot iron sword. The more you dig, the more you're gonna find. A 7-foot sword that must belong to a giant. The first major discovery came in the form of an enormous 16.4 foot long wooden coffin. Yep, definitely sounds like a giant to me. And what about this shield that had a mirror on it? Mirrors have the power to reflect images and start fires, were deeply sacred objects in ancient times. The shield even had some writing on it, which is believed to be a spell to keep evil spirits away. So yeah, 7-foot Japanese sword known as the Demon Slayer.
For those who needed more convincing, this is definitely not a volcano. Open up your eyes to the true beauty of this realm. Question everything, friends. Once your eyes are open, it becomes clear as day. We are the ants. Question everything, friends.
This is the crew of the 1986 Challenger space shuttle mission. Infamously, on January 28, 1986, the space shuttle exploded right after takeoff. The disaster was broadcast on live television to 40 million viewers. Roughly 80 seconds after the launch, the shuttle exploded and all 7 crew members lost their lives. This is Judy Resnick, an engineer and pilot aboard the Challenger mission. In 2013, an eagle-eyed internet user found Judith Resnick, a law professor at Harvard Law School. Some people were a little taken aback by the identical name, age, and likeness, so they started digging. This is Michael J. Smith, also an engineer and pilot aboard the Challenger shuttle, who passed away that fateful day in 1986 at the age of 39 years old. This is Dr. Michael J. Smith, professor of engineering at the University of Wisconsin. This is Sharon Krista McAuliffe, arguably one of the most famous things about the Challenger mission. She was supposedly just a teacher that was picked at random to be one of the astronauts. which made it all the more tragic when she passed away due to the Challenger disaster in 1986. This is Sharon A. McAuliffe, also a law professor who received her degree shortly after the Challenger disaster. Dick Scobie was the commander of the mission. Here's Commander Dick Scobie next to Richard Scobie, the CEO of Cows and Trees. Here's his company's original logo. It's a cow, but it's not in a tree. It's strapped to a rocket, and gee, that jet stream kind of looks familiar. In fact, just in case I wasn't making it clear, the top picture is the Challenger ship shortly after exploding. So, you know, Astronauts Ronald McNair and Ellison Onizuka both passed away when the Challenger shuttle exploded. Miraculously, it was found out that they both had twin brothers, Carl McNair and Claude Onizuka. But ancestry searches were done for both Carl and Claude, and there was no birth records found. And the odds of two sets of identical twins in a crew of 7 are astronomical. But that's just a theory. Rest in peace to the crew of the Challenger space shuttle mission.
What they're claiming is that they went 1,000 times farther than they can send astronauts today, 50 years ago, on the first attempt with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone. I mean, when they flew across the Atlantic for the first time, a few years later, hundreds of aircraft and thousands of aircraft were flying across the Atlantic. When they went to the North Pole and South Pole here on Earth, they never made it the first attempt. It took multiple times. And there's never been a technological achievement that no one could repeat 50 years later. It's like me telling you 50 years ago, Toyota made a car that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline. And yet today, 5 decades later, their best car can only go 50 miles per gallon or 1,000th the distance. You would laugh and say the original claim is preposterous. And so here we are 50 years later, and now the farthest they can send an astronaut to the moon is 1,000th the distance that they claim to have done on the first attempt 50 years ago with less computing power than a cell phone, 1/1,000,000th of the computing power. It just doesn't add up. It's the only technological achievement that could not be repeated 50 years later. It's never happened. It's also the only time that they deliberately destroyed a technology. I mean, the B-52 is 70 years old, and there's still 200 of them in service. And yet they admit they destroyed all the Apollo equipment, and they're claiming they have to go back to the moon and recreate it from scratch. They destroyed all the original videotapes, all the original blueprints. You would never do that if you really went. You would only do that if there was a fraud and you were trying to cover your tracks.
Stop scrolling. Do we live on Earth or do we live in Earth? Think about it. If we lived on Earth, we would be on the outside of it. Something like this. But if we live in Earth, it'll be like this, actually in it. I personally believe we live in Earth like this, and we walk on flat land. Now think about it, flat land. Imagine a landscape like this. Theoretically speaking, this flat land could be Earth, and there could be a dome over it. Let me be more specific. For experimental purposes, you would put a dome over it and shrink humans down to an ant size. That would mean this space right here would be big as fuck, and you would be walking on flat land. Where do y'all get the notion of a curve? We're walking on flat land. Just like this right here, but on a bigger scale with a dome above us. We don't live on Earth. We live in Earth. I personally think that this is so ridiculous, because some people actually think of it this way. What about the people at the bottom? The people upside down speaks for itself, and don't say that's gravity.
So a while, like I'd say the early 2000s, there was a handful of, homies, casual people, whatever. And there was this one person there, an older man, and he was just talking about, there's these things called conspiracies or whatever. And I've always questioned a lot of things that, I want to know the facts and, where things stem from. And I ended up calling him out on it, and I was totally against the grain with it. I was like, you sound retarded. Like, bottom line, it sounds dumb. We all see pictures of space, and we see pictures of planets, and in school, they teach us all these things. They show us videos. We went to the International Space Station, and they show you how they make these things that go into space, and so on and so forth. But so I really went against him, and he told me, well, prove me wrong then. Prove me wrong. And I made it my point to destroy this guy. I'm gonna show you that, no matter how I look, I'm educated on this or whatever. I mean, not at that time I wasn't, but I'm gonna educate myself and I'm gonna blow you out the water, homie. And I went home that night and I started looking up some stuff on the internet that led me into looking up a couple of books, looking up you know, definitions of words that they use. I looked up you know, who founded NASA, what these people were involved in, and stuff like that. And then I started looking at you know, these pictures, and all these pictures of Saturn, these pictures of Mars, all these pictures of Earth, and none of them were real photos. And they tell you that. They tell you right on their page and websites that these aren't real photos. They're renderings. They say rendering, which means it's what the artist depicted it would look like, or it says CGI, computer generated image, on it, and the artist that developed it, the software he used, and that. So, I mean, come on, is that a real photo? No, it's not. So when you buy yourself, you want to go buy yourself a real telescope and go look at how these so-called planets really look, they look like they're sitting in water up there. And when you go into, when you educate yourself on you know, our tribes, our oral traditions and stuff that we learn within our tribes, you learn that these are frequencies up there. It's not, they're not planets, but they're pronounced planet, a frequency, a dimension. The stars that we see that are twinkling, those are called luminaries. They're watchers. They're called the watchers in scripture and oral history. That's what they're called. They're literally like different angels in the different 13 realms of heaven. The ones that don't blink, that are just plain, those are called the wandering stars. Those are planets or dimensions. They're literally gods that they used to worship back then. Mars, Marduk, Saturn, Saturnalius, and so on and so forth, to the 9 lower realms. So when you go into the oral history of our culture, you learn this, and you learn that these are dimensions of the 9 lower realms, which are bad energies or frequencies that they used to worship and do sacrificing.